Hello, Rogers community. You are now tuned in to the Rogers Podcast. Get ready to feel inspired, empowered, and to learn from our expert interviews. This podcast is made by the Rogers Group for the Rogers Group. And now, let's dive into today's episode.
Welcome to the Rogers Podcast. My name is Robin Chan and I am your host. Today we have our CEO, none other than Philippe Espitalier-Noël. Let's welcome Philippe. Philippe, welcome on the Rogers Podcast.
Morning, Robin.
Good morning.
Great to be with you this morning.
Thank you for being our guest. Such an honor to be here with you, to be able to speak to you today. So let's get to know you better today. So who is Philippe Espitalier-Noël and what is your journey at Rogers?
My career started in Mauritius when I graduated as an agricultural economist in 1987. I spent 4 years here working in the sugar industry and in what was then Arthur Andersen de Châtel-Dumais. And then I went back to London to do an MBA. My career took me back to Mauritius in 1997 when I joined Rogers in the strategic and planning division, which was actually in Le Cascade building in those days. Coming back from London, therefore, I started in that department at that time. It was end of 1997. And I must say, I've had a great series of good decisions in my career. For me, a career is a series of small good decisions, and I never tried to go too fast, and I think I consolidated my profile gradually. When I got into Rogers in 1997, the group was already very big. We were already a significant group with a large turnover base, with a perception very often that Rogers was the number one business in Mauritius. We were large by turnover, large by number of employees. But in those days, we had lived a number of very exciting developments, but we had done so many things that quite a few businesses were not really performing. So high on turnover, but quite low on profitability, which I took a lot of interest to analyze, and we came up with quite a few diagnostics. And with Tim Taylor, the CEO who took over in those days, we launched a lot of rethinking of the business of Rogers. And over the last 25 years, I've had the pleasure of contributing to all the rethinking of the group, moving away from manufacturing, moving towards services. So we ended up defining ourselves as a service-based organization with international aspirations, which I think we've been developing over the last 5 years. It's been an exciting journey. It's been fun. When I come to Rogers, I have a smile every day. So it's been for me a very pleasant journey. I feel it's been a privilege to have the opportunity to work on shaping the future of a group like Rogers. So it's been a lot of fun for me.
So the group has finalized its 3-year strategic plan called CAP26. So can you tell us a little bit more about what is it about?
I think before we jump into CAP26, if I may, Robin, I think we have to cast our mind back to where this whole thinking process actually started. And in fact, when I arrived in 1997 and we were looking at the future of the business, we realized, in fact, that we were not really driven by strategic thinking. And we did our first strat plan. The group did its first group-wide strategic planning in 1999. And this year, it's the 10th strategic planning session that we do. So I think we are now very well versed with the things that we need to do. It's an opportunity for the whole organization to pause, to think about what we've achieved, to look at the lessons learned, to try and evaluate how we could have done things differently. So it's an opportunity for the organization to pause and to think again and to try and see within context how we could start doing things differently. And we mobilized, when we did the first plan in 1999, we mobilized the senior management team, probably about, I would say, the top 25 people. It was really top down to some extent. Not that much consultation across the whole organization. And that has changed over the years, because as we started with the top team of 25, this year, as you were aware, for CAP26, trying to make a diagnostic of how well we've done for CAP23, which ended 3 weeks ago. And thinking forward, we brought together 300 of our senior managers. That's half of our management base. We're now 600 senior managers in the group. And we managed to mobilize half of it for the actual strategic launch. So it's been more and more, how would I say, enlarged in terms of how we mobilize. A lot more bottom-up thinking, which is happening. So we got the top team at the corporate center thinking about the big things, and we got all the managers, the 600 managers, in consultation with our 5,000 employees, who actually think through things and bringing it all together to make sense. And I think maybe before going to CAP26 and the main building blocks of CAP26 is, I think we can take pride in the good work we've done in CAP23. And I want to thank all my fellow managers and all the employees of the group who have contributed, every single person at their own level. When we had to review the first version of CAP23, we were getting into the midst of COVID-19, which was obviously quite concerning. There's a lot of uncertainty. We were not sure how we would be able to navigate the landscape of the uncertainty. You know, we talk about the VUCA world,
so how do you manage to overcome, to deal with that?
I think the thing that came through for me is, when we get through those uncertain times, how do you mobilize the team? How do you mobilize the team? And the only way to do it is to work on the system, is to review the system with which we usually do things, because in different times you got to come up with different alternatives, with different solutions. And that's when we came up with the CNC philosophy and program, which helped us through the Marshall community to mobilize all our senior managers into one group and really uniting within the difficulty. We had to charter fairly rough waters. That ability to mobilize behind the key challenges, I think, is what really helped us. And we've been working towards a corporate culture where people are able to think independently. People assume their own autonomous sense of responsibility. And obviously with the values that we have, particularly agility, which is a value that needs to anticipate and adapt in a rapid manner. I think by the time the group faced all the headwinds, we were well equipped to actually tackle the challenges in a very decentralized manner, which made us very successful. And by the time things opened up again, we had a program beyond Vivacis, which was managing the downturn. We have the upturn program, which really helped us manage the growth side that came back to us, and to end up with record profits. I think we've done a lot of great work together. So I take the opportunity to thank all those who are going to be watching this podcast in terms of the contribution that you have each made to the success of the business. So thank you to you all.
Let's talk more about, why do you choose 3 years? Why not more? Why not less?
It's a good question. I don't think strategy is something that stops. In fact, the strategic dynamics probably is revisited on a daily basis. I myself revisit our strategy almost on a daily basis. But in terms of mobilizing almost 5,000 people towards very specific ambitions, you require focus, and you require a focus in a time frame where people can actually understand what they can do. It has to be long enough to make some fundamental changes that bring new potential. And it has to be short enough for people to feel that it is sufficiently motivating and that it is a measurable time frame where, in their own decisions to stay within the group, they can contribute meaningfully. So I think 3 years is a good time frame, but I don't think we should look at strategy as something that is contained within only those 3 years. Some of what we're doing right now has got to be looked at with a 5 to 10 year plan. Some of the other things that we're doing that are contained in the 3-year plan have got to be done during the first 6 months of the first financial year. So these things, I think, are organized in a way to put order in people's mind, but also to create maximum alignment behind the key success factors and the key dimensions that require attention. So I think we should look at it like that, rather than just something which is really fixed in time.
What are the four chosen strategic pillars that impact our strategy over the next 3 years?
The first one, which has always been key, but even more topical right now, is obviously on the corporate culture. And when I talk corporate culture, for me, I talk about all the employee base, the management layer, the need to be able to attract and grow talent, and help them grow, yes, but also find a way to make sure that we can retain talent. That's key to what we do. And within the talent dynamics, finding technical experts or people that are really good at something specific from an administration point of view, from a compliance point of view, is not too hard. There's so many well-trained youngsters these days. What's harder is to actually find a way to pull them into a common corporate culture where they feel a sense of purpose, where they sense an adhesion to a certain identity, and gradually from that position progress towards a personal sense of purpose where the notion of entrepreneurship finds a way. So the first dimension beyond the notion of the employee base and talent management and administration capacity is getting the entrepreneurial flair and the entrepreneurial mindset into a maximum number of people, because at the end of the day, it's the entrepreneurial mindset that helps us to grow. That's a very special spin. And obviously, the second leg that we have is excellence and efficiency within that space of excellence. By the time you've built the right team, you got the right people in the right place, which is a very difficult thing to do. Probably the most difficult job of the CEO is to identify the right talent and to create the combination of the right job for the appropriate talent. And it's with that proper mix and the ideal positioning and structure that you can really strive towards excellence and efficiency. And that's very important, because nowadays clients, if you look at for example, the luxury goods business, it hasn't known the crisis. Even during the crisis, you've had best luxury companies in the world generating 7-8% growth in their turnover. So the luxury business doesn't know the crisis, and yet it's on the most expensive part of the purse.
Yeah.
Why are people prepared to do that? It's because they get quality. So excellence and efficiency, for me, there are dimensions that drive quality of service, a guarantee of a promise that whatever the client ends up getting is what you have promised. And getting that promise in adequation with client experience is not always easy, and you got to work at it all the time. And the whole organization has got to work at it all the time, because at the end of the day, it's a client that pays the bill, and making sure that we get the quality and the excellence in place enables us to satisfy the client and to make sure that the perceived value is at as high as can be. And it's in that perceived value that our margins lie. So excellence is all about proper pricing, I would just say maximum pricing, at a level that satisfies a customer's aspirations and satisfy what the customer is looking for. I think moving the whole organization into excellence of service, into excellence of delivery, with better pricing that is perceived by a customer as being the right pricing, is a very important dimension going forward for CAP26. I think we've got a lot of it already in place, but it's now time for us to move towards international standards. And the third leg, as you know, of our 4 pillars is about internationalization. And why internationalization? Is because Mauritius is a small market. We've got a population which is not growing anymore. We've got an aging population emerging, and purchasing power is probably going to grow, but maybe not as fast as we would have liked it to grow. The local population is already well served, a lot of competition in many sectors. So we got to look at an international client base. Yeah. We already have it in many of our business lines: Velogic, Rogers Aviation, sales overseas, but also sales to overseas clients. Our offshore business with Rogers Capital serves an international client base. Our hotels serve an international client base. So we're already serving an international client base who are having international level expectations. So I think we have been quite nicely trained. But the next phase is about going overseas. And if you look at the ratio of overseas employees to local employees, I think we've gone from 13 to 18% over the last 4 years. We've reached now almost 900 people out of 4,800. So the growth curve is emerging nicely. We are seeing that our gradual route towards internationalization is bringing more and more of our employees into that space, working in overseas geographies, including India, France, East Africa, Madagascar, and the islands of the Indian Ocean. So throughout that transition over the last 20 years, slowly but surely, we've turned a lot of small entities into profitable businesses. And today, in some of our business lines, almost half of our turnover and profit base, like in Velogic and Rogers Aviation, more than half is coming from our operations overseas, both in turnover and in profitability. And gradually, I think we also seeing that shift emerging. And so therefore, the philosophy of internationalization sits on two levels: serving international customers from a Mauritian base properly, which we're already doing, and serving an international customer base and a local customer base from an overseas geography, which we are also successfully doing now. I'm proud to say, and I thank all the managers again and the CEOs who have been helping us for the last 20 years, but all our overseas businesses are now profitable. So that's an exciting dimension. And on the fourth pillar, which we've adopted way back, we've been working at it since 2009 when government introduced the CSR regulations and all the rest, with 2% of the profits going to CSR. But we volunteered when then Minister of Finance, Ramasitanen, called upon private sector to contribute voluntarily its 2% of profits towards that cause. We immediately joined, even before the regulation actually was undertaken. And ever since, I think Rogers has shown that it was volunteer. And in those days, maybe it was more focused on poverty alleviation and reaching out to those communities where government had realized that they were not necessarily that efficient to support the needy in some specific areas because it was too far from their ability to serve everybody in one same way. And I think the private sector has come a long way in terms of consolidating NGOs and structuring their own businesses to play that social part and to play that inclusive development part. And that was the first level, as contributing and supporting the needy and ensuring that no one was left aside when it comes to contributing or participating in the benefits of economic development. Over the last 5-6 years, the whole thing has shifted away from philanthropy to CSR in 2009 and now to sustainability and inclusive development. And the whole thing is now ingrained in the way we do business because our lives, the lives of all the youngsters, the future of our little island is severely challenged by global warming and whatever's happening in the rest of the world. Although we generate only 0.007% of negative polluting gas emissions, mostly CO2, but also others, we actually bear the full brunt of global warming with rising sea levels, rising sea temperatures. Most of our corals and our reefs are now endangered in a big way. And we have no choice but to do our part. And on that front, I think we are fully aware and mobilized in terms of embedding, whether it's clean energy shifts and or the dynamics of the circular economy, including 0-kilometer farm-to-fork concepts for our tourists. Most of our businesses, lots of our businesses, including Essentia, Velogic, Rogers Hospitality, and all the others, in fact, have already done quite a lot to demonstrate that they are willing to contribute. Now, it's not easy because even our individual efforts and our collective efforts, we know will not be sufficient. It's the whole planet who needs to wake up so that there is enough being done to prevent the scale of the damage. Every year, international scientists are coming up with a faster view of the damage being created by global warming. We've seen the last 2 years all the unplanned and natural disasters that have come across, from fires across the place to very heavy winds. And that's set to continue. In fact, that's set to intensify. So we have to be into the proactive dynamics. We have to do whatever we can to mitigate. And I must admit, for me, this is the most challenging thing for humanity right now. So if it's challenging for humanity, it's challenging for Rogers. If it's challenging for Rogers, it's challenging for you and me equally. We are all concerned. We are all concerned. Unfortunately, we are living with the true nature of human beings. We are selfish beings. And right now, we've not woken up sufficiently to the need to support the common good. And I hope that humanity will wake up early enough so that we can prevent, beyond all the physical pain that we're going to get, that we can go far enough to protect humanity. We are all concerned, and we're going to do our bit.
Yeah. So as the Rogers CEO, what priorities and challenges do you foresee in executing the CAP26 strategy?
I think the first dimension, which is not necessarily expressed as a challenge or an opportunity, but which is, I think, fundamental, is the notion of focus. We've come from the notion of being a conglomerate 25 years ago, and today we are a large, diversified group, but we focus on 5 main sectors. And I think that the first thing of importance is to maintain the focus on those 5 dimensions. In life and in strategy, I think it's important to try and articulate what you're going to do, but framing it correctly is also about telling people about what you're not going to do. Just after that comes the discipline, because if people don't rally and don't understand why, then you can get some indiscipline in that sense of focus, and you get people coming to talk to you about opportunities that you don't want to pursue. So maintaining that focus, that's why we really try to articulate our pillars in a clear manner, our internationalization strategy in a clear manner, our talent attraction and retention strategy in a clear manner. So getting that level of discipline. And then the next thing, once you've clarified the what and the how, then you got to make sure that you do it again and again and again and again, so that you become excellent at what you do, showing to the world, showing to the employee base, showing to our customers that we are really good at it. That level of focus and discipline keeps us on the international benchmark. So that is the core difficulty. And of course, you got second, third level issues that come with it, and part of it is talent attraction. We now know that we have a dearth of talent, I would say, in many places around the world. Most developed economies with an aging population are facing a dearth of talent. Mauritius is not spared. We are also facing that dearth of talent. Ensuring that we therefore maintain sufficient magnetism and attractivity to get those talent on board is a challenge, because it means you got to communicate properly, you got to be clear in how you articulate your sense of purpose, and you have to end up being meaningful for a maximum of talented individuals. I must say that Rogers has always enjoyed a very good employer brand, and we see that in most of the areas where we need to recruit, we end up finding the critical mass of people who want to come and work with us. But we've got to maintain that reputation, and it's not only a reputation, we've got to walk the talk. So that's challenges in those kind of broad, generic dimensions. I think very specifically to us, we need to reinvent ourselves, and getting a productive capacity out of our 7,000 acres in a manner where we generate positive cash flows and where we no longer make losses is a challenge. So how do we do that in a responsible manner? Responsible development to create a sustainable art de vivre, in the tropics is what we're all about. But I think it's not too hard to describe, but it's not that easy to implement. So that's, I think, a challenge.
Yeah.
One of the exciting challenges is within the next 3 to 5 years to make Rogers Capital emerge as really one additional solid pillar, generating recurrent positive cash flow in a material way for Rogers is one of the challenges that I'm going to drive.
You talk about expanding more of businesses. So we focus more on East Africa. Why this region has been chosen?
It's a good question, Robin, and thank you for bringing me back to that, because I think in the challenges I should have talked about internationalization. We have identified way back that we want to be a service-based organization with international aspirations, and we've been deploying that gradually. And as we've deployed it, we've also learned some of the tricks of the trade in terms of how we should do it, where we should be going. And obviously we've identified that for us, it's more exciting to be looking at countries that have got fairly high growth rates. Those often come with population growth rates that are still fairly positive, and where the margins in the business lines that we have can be good. So we've identified, not surprisingly, the emerging markets around us, and we've identified India, Madagascar, and East Africa. Those are the three parts in our midst where we feel we have good linkages. India, for obvious reasons, we are quite comfortable working in India. Working in India in logistics, when you work towards imports and exports, French-based entities, which are either in France or Belgium or Switzerland, and that take comfort working with us because our people are bilingual, so we can operate from India with a French connection, so that makes it attractive to some extent. Madagascar, we've been at it for a long time and we understand Madagascar very well. In fact, the Rogers' first investments in Madagascar was done in the early 50s, so we've been there for more than a half of a century. So I think we got some depth of presence and understanding. And East Africa has been the newer part. But again, one thing that I believe in, which may come across as a bit silly, but it's got its precious recommendation. And I don't recommend to people to try and expand in countries where you need to make a stopover before you reach the country. Mm-hmm. A direct flight to Kenya is 4 hours away. It's next door. It's a large population. Most of the people there speak English. We have bilingual advantage again. We have a network of international players who are there. We are familiar with the mechanics, the means and ways, and the system that prevails in Kenya, but also in the neighborhood and in the neighboring countries. And we've made a first incursion some 6 years ago. Worked well for us. We've expanded with an acquisition last year. It's worked well for us. We are on the road to generate almost 100 million profit from our Kenyan operations for the next financial year. And this is a fast-growing population, increasing purchasing power, international presence, people who behave in an entrepreneurial way, critical mass of entrepreneurs who behave like we do. So when you look at it all together, it's an exciting territory for us. And I think out of everything else, quite a few Mauritian companies in the region of Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, have seen this part of the world as being something that can be expanded. And as other Mauritian companies are settling in, that's also creating opportunities between us in terms of supporting each other and that. So it's got a good financial services system, which is growing, good IT base, connectivity now with all the cordless solutions and the satellite solutions, creating connectivity almost everywhere in that part of the world. So modernization of port services. So we're seeing a lot going in the right direction. And obviously, you can't think that it's going to be one long, comfortable road. It's gonna have its own bumps. But altogether, we are confident that with the experience that we've lived, that it's a good place to mobilize more resources.
Philippe, we are part of the ENL Group, who also has a new CEO. The person is Philippe Espitalier-Noël. What is your vision in terms of collaboration and synergy with ENL?
ENL has been a shareholder of the Rogers Group for more than 50 years now, and therefore has been part of the fabric of the business, influencing its future as a minority shareholder a long time back. ENL became a much more influential shareholder since 2012 with a 60% stake in its shareholding. Obviously, it's a material majority stake. And over the last 12 years, 10 years, we have been collaborating very positively. And I think that after those 10 years, we have aligned many of our ways, many of our systems. Corporate culture has become a lot closer. And I think today our interests are perfectly aligned. There is absolutely every reason why it is in the best interest of Rogers, of course, of ENL, that we spend more time together and that we actually work more intensively together towards creating a more efficient and a more effective ecosystem. And I think I don't mean ecosystem in a conceptual way, but more in a material, pragmatic manner. I think there are so many linkages, there are so many overlapping zones of capability. There is so much complementarity in terms of professionals that operate within the enlarged ENL Group. A lot more can now be implemented. And I think we have to expect that during the CAP26 plan, and I would say immediately, we have already in the development process of the next 3-year plan for CAP26, there's a lot of exchanges that have already taken place. And we're already seeing out of the first 3 weeks of dynamics with Gilbert that a lot of pragmatic zones of collaboration are not identified anymore, but implemented. So we have to expect that to accelerate. It's a very good development.
And Rogers has embarked into a meaningful change journey, right? We have rebranded ourselves. So what does this mean, and what advice would you give to the Rogers community to embrace meaningful change?
Like in any situation, we have always actually allowed ourselves to make some shifts to our values, some shifts to our motto, according to the situation in which the group is. And I think not all the groups do it like that, but we have been used to adjusting, modifying, refining the sense of purpose. And I believe we are living in an era where change is the only constant. Yeah. And it's been abused, that phrase has been abused a bit over time, but the pace of change has increased. You are ever having to reinvent. By the time you've reinvented, you believe you've come to the next level, and then artificial intelligence and ChatGPT arrives. We haven't talked much about digitization and the IT setup. So what does this really mean? It's an extension of the philosophy of agility that we adopted in 1999. In fact, the agility was introduced as a value of the group in our first 3-year plan. And I think meaningful change reinforces the notion that we have no choice but to be curious enough to be watching out for the dimensions of change that are around us. And the more we are conscious with an outward mindset, the more we are trying to read the forces at play, the more that will require us to do proactive change. So this whole philosophy is about raising the consciousness of the individual and the collective to yet another level beyond the level of agility in order to make this something of your own. So my advice is for every single individual to try and understand those things that are at play. We've talked about sustainability earlier on. We've talked about the planet, biodiversity being threatened. If we did not have organizations like the wildlife and others like Reef to rally behind a certain level of consciousness to protect that biodiversity, would not be where we are today. So my advice is make it something personal. Try to think about it and create a dimension that is really meaningful for you. Personally, I'm working on reducing my own personal CO2 imprint. So it's a holistic behavior which you're going to need to watch and say, what's my own personal contribution to pollution and to the use of dirty energy? As the whole country is embarking behind a cleaner solution, I think it's 2030, we're planning to reach 60% of our national energy consumption coming from clean energy. By the time that becomes a reality, the more individual behavior can actually piggyback on that national effort as well. So make it personal.
Make it personal to create meaningful change.
Yeah, make it personal.
I like that. To conclude, Philippe, what is your one shot of insight for the Rogers community?
The notion of curiosity is a very important dimension. The effort of having an independent, autonomous way of thinking, which allows afterwards, with maximum discernment, to take educated decisions. So yeah, autonomy, independence, curiosity, to get to that level of maximum discernment, because as a business person, you need to take decisions all the time. And the more you are curious, the more you're reading the dynamics at play, the more chances that your discernment in making a diagnostic and applying a solution to that diagnostic will be sharp enough to actually make a difference. And maybe for me and for everybody else, and especially for the youth, the last one is patience. Nothing of substance, nothing that you can really be proud of can be done in a short amount of time. It takes time to build things that are deep in quality, that are able to sustain somebody's livelihood and aspirations, and taking the right set of decisions as you grow yourself, as an individual, requires that level of patience. So last message to our own business community is, let's not forget that it takes time to build powerful solutions.
So it's to be curious and to have patience.
Yeah, curious, independent and autonomous in your thinking, and cultivate your patience. And if you're patient, you can get to almost everything that you desire in life.
Well, thank you very much, Philippe, for being here on the Rogers Podcast.
Robin.
Thank you for joining us on the Rogers Podcast. That is all for today. Until next time, see you again.